Thank you, everybody, for attending. This is our third and final session for community outreach. We've already discussed community mapping. We've discussed community networking, and now we're going to discuss planning the event. And please keep in mind that everything that we're going to be discussing this evening is dependent upon the first two portions. That community mapping, community networking are foundational before planning an event, especially because we're talking about communities that have very little JNF awareness, don't have any full-time people, probably know nothing from trees, even if that. There are actually people in this world who still have not heard of Jewish National Fund. So those two steps are foundational and required. This step is the most active in terms of thinking and planning and awareness for yourself, but it also is where you're going to be looping in on a regular basis your staff people. So in this case, we're small communities, it would be myself and Ben. We are your resources. We work for you. And so please do keep us looped in there, just as in community mapping and community networking. If you ever have a question, we are here at your disposal. Even more so in this part, because we are going to be your contacts for speakers, for venues, for if any money needs to be spent, things like that. It's going to be us that will need to facilitate that with you and for you. So please keep that in mind. So that said, I do have a presentation for this evening, as well as for some examples. Please feel free to interrupt me. And if I don't see your hand, please feel free to just speak out, as we are all Jews with opinions in this room, and everybody should have the opportunity to be heard. So let me go ahead and see if I can do this the right way. Share my screen. Screen number 2. We have no video. All right. So here we are. McCore Outreach Training number 3. We've done the community mapping. We know the institutions. We know the formal leaders. We know the informal leaders. We know people with heavy opinions. We know people with not so many opinions. We hopefully have names of children and grandchildren who are in the community, out of the community, have been to Israel, not to Israel, that those who have been giving to JNF for 40, 50 years, but never bought more than $54 worth of trees. We know those people who are very excited about having a JNF event in their town. And perhaps we also know those are, that might be nice, but that's okay. So we know all this information. And we do have a critical mass of people who want to know more, who want to gather together with like-minded Zionists to hear more about how JNF is continuing the task of building and securing our land for our people. And so we are going to start putting dates on calendars. And as we're thinking about dates and calendars, remember that we're not doing this only after we are doing the mapping and the networking. We are thinking about possible dates and blackout dates while listening to our community contacts. So we're keeping all this in mind at the same time. It is, and for those who can multitask, it's important to keep it in your head. If you're not good at multitasking, make sure you're keeping notes. And of course, we need to keep notes anyway, because remember, everything needs to go in Salesforce, so we have it all documented. But we're going to move towards those calendars and dates. And I want to impress upon you the importance of checking the Jewish calendar, the civil calendar, local community calendars, meaning if there's a small JCC or federation, congregations, schools, it's important to have all those calendars in mind as you are trying to come up with a good date working with your new network for this event. And just to share with you some examples, here's HebeCal. I use this website probably 3 or 4 times a week. Simply click on the calendar and go to the month you're in question, and you can see where the holy days are, what the Parsha is, if you need a topic. It's very easy to navigate through. And so you're very careful not to step on any obvious toes of the Jewish calendar. Timeanddate.com/calendar is fantastic for the civil calendar. You can create your own calendar for as many months or years as you need, include whatever dates you need for whatever country, whatever state. And you can include religious holidays. You can not include religious holidays. Highly recommend this tool as well. As an example for a congregation, this is Congregation Agadat Akim in Savannah, one of my favorite small communities. And so you can see here's for June, we've got 2 opportunities here that the rabbis teaching on the rabbis of the Mishnah. So we probably don't want to schedule anything there. Otherwise, it looks like June is open. So we can look at July. Oh, this is an ongoing thing. So we wouldn't want anything on a Wednesday morning. And then August, and hopefully they already have September updated with Rosh Hashanah. So we need to check the congregational calendar. Here's the community calendar for the SAVJ, for the Jewish Federation of Savannah. And they, of course, are going to have their items probably more up to date than your average congregation, in my experience. But make sure you've got their calendar in mind. In this case, as I've gotten to know Savannah, I know that every week they have a food for thought class, either on Zoom or in person. Lately, it's been every other week is in person versus on Zoom. And you can actually write to their project manager and get the topics. So if you have an event coming up, so let's see, this is July, say you want to do it in August before Holy Days. So you might want to look and see, well, interesting, Jewish War Veterans meeting. That might be relevant to something that JNF is doing, or any of these food for thought meetings might be relevant. So we might want to schedule a meeting closer to or farther from something going on in the community. And then interestingly enough, here is the Savannah, Chatham County public school system school year calendar. So if you're looking to see when kids are out for the summer, well, that happened last week. And so it may be that people are starting their vacation here in June, and that wouldn't have been a good time to schedule anything. Looking back, when does school start? And of course, these days, past dates don't necessarily indicate future dates, but it's important that we at least check and consider school calendars as well. So make sure that you can saw all these sources. Keep in mind the people that you're speaking with at the time as you're going through the networking, so that we can have some good dates where people are available, topical with the community, what's going on, and so that we don't step on any toes in this very simple way. Second thing is format and our venue. We can look at format and venue in 2 major buckets. The first is that of the parlor meeting. And most of us are familiar with what a parlor meeting is. It's usually for a smaller group, like 10, 24 people. Oftentimes it is going to be in a private home. And oftentimes the people in attendance are going to be firsthand friends, acquaintances, fellow congregants of those who are hosting, because that, of course, makes for the easiest invite, attendance, and hopefully ask at the end. We generally have no additional staff requirements for a parlor meeting, just your 1 staff person plus your COE support. So in this case, it would be me and Ben. If you are working in a different community with a local staff, then it's still, even if you're looking with local staff, a parlor meeting still does not require additional staff or hiring somebody to come in and hand out name badges, take attendance, anything like that. So parlor meeting is often good for a first-time intimate gathering with people who know each other, who share similar passions, in specifically with regard to Israel, who share perhaps specific passions within their own community and are largely know what they're going to be expecting, and they have come and showing support for Israel, Jewish National Fund, and they largely expect to get some sort of an ask. The second type is the small cultivation. And a small cultivation is for less than 100 attendees, but it may require some additional staff because we have, if you've got 80 people that you may be showing up, you of course not going to be in somebody's home. You're probably going to be in a synagogue or other community venue. And we may need to actually hire either an outside vendor or have an additional staff person come into the location in order to help make sure everything is organized and ready, that there's enough staff to talk to people, to answer questions, that there are enough staff, of course, to clean up afterward and make sure we put everything back nice the way it goes. So these are our two format venue options that we are going to be considering for small community outreach and an initial JNF awareness event. Most of the time, it's going to be the parlor meeting. It's probably not going to be the small cultivation, but I didn't want to have you feel that you couldn't go beyond the parlor meeting. Definitely, if it's feasible, if there's the interest, then absolutely, we can plan for a small cultivation. Any questions at this point from anybody? And you're muted.
Has there ever been a small cultivation done by you guys yet?
Yes, we had a small cultivation in Hilton Head back in March. We had about 60, almost 70 people at an evening event. And then the next morning for the men's breakfast, there were about 45. So we actually had two in less than 24 hours. Fortunately, though, we didn't have to hire any additional staff because the congregation took care of everything.
Okay. Did you do an ask there?
We did not do an ask. That was a special event where we actually were asked not to do an ask. Generally, those types of events don't go forward. However, because it is Hilton Head and due to the combined capacity of folks who live in Hilton Head, we decided to go ahead with it. And we're going to go back and do at least one, if not two parlor meetings this fall in Hilton Head. So we've gone about it a little differently, giving the introduction to JNF on a large scale and then moving to a smaller scale in order to make the ask and invite people to join us in investing in our land and our people.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll move forward to topics and speakers. Always be thinking about possible topics and speakers and those to stay away from when listening to your community contacts. So again, you got that community mapping done, you're doing the community networking, you're asking people, when was the last time they were at Israel? What do they always visit when they go to Israel? What touches them most when they go to Israel? You've hopefully given them some of the jnf.org website to look at. You've talked about different projects and our 7 domains of work. And so you have an idea. And as you're talking to more and more people, you're probably going to come up with a pattern, because that's what happens in communities. People tend to, there's a sociological term, isomorphism, where people who are in a similar community tend to start to think similar to each other. And so you're probably going to come up with some patterns. You will certainly have some outliers in that pattern, people who definitely do not fit the pattern of topics and interests, but most people are going to come in under the bell curve of the majority. And so keep that in mind when you're making your notes. Every time you make a call, what are the topics that are going to be most interesting, and so that the community as a whole can feel invested in. Give you an example from Montgomery, Alabama. I had the Federation director and 2 rabbis say, Sam, we've got 4 trips to Israel planned over the next year. It would be great if we had a community project where we could take people in early 2023 to visit, to feel invested because they've already given as a community, and then we can bring in individual units, families and couples and individuals into JNF in that way. And that was a fantastic partnership model, I think, that we're going to use not only in Montgomery, but also in other smaller communities across the country. And so allow people to tell you what they know about their community and how it would work best to help bring in more units and more investors to the Jewish National Fund. One thing that we can offer for any type of venue is a JNF 101. Because so many people don't know from trees, or maybe even don't know anything about JNF, even somebody who's coming to a parlor meeting, they know the host, they love Israel. They've been, as I had been to Israel 9 times when I started with JNF, but the only thing I had ever done was plant trees. Who knew there was so much going on in Israel under JNF auspices? And so we might want to have a presentation on, this is JNF, this is our history, this is our vision, these are our major domains of work. And by the way, we'd like to focus on one area tonight. This JNF 101 can be presented by a lay leader or a staff person. It can be customized to a long or short form option. And again, it covers the overall history and vision and positions the Spotlight Project within the JNF universe. So let me show you quickly what this might look like. The long form, which we generally would not be using, but I want to just show you what it might look like. This actually is tailored to small communities. I talk about how wonderful it is to be in a small community. And then I go right into JNF More Than Trees, show our highlighted video, and then I dive into the long-term plan for moving people from the core to our strategic areas in the north and the south. And then I go into a history of Zionism and talk about what it is to be a people with a land. I do some sociology, I do some history, I do a little politics, and I really give them a meaty taste of what JNF is all about. Why trees? How are we planning for the long term? And then I go into specific projects that we might be covering in that evening. That's a lot to take in. And so most of the time we're going to use just the short form presentation, which is going to simply give a basic historical overview. Yes, we do trees, but we're more than trees. And let's highlight some of our distinctiveness, such as in education and advocacy and community building. And we would like to invite you to join us as an investor, as a partner with JNF. So those are examples, and we can customize these for any community to make sure it's scratching the itch that they have, meeting their passions, their interests, and what hopefully will be the key to bring them in as a community as well as individual units. So it's important, of course, that you, the lay leader, be familiar with our 7 domains of work, as well as familiar with the major projects within each domain. A great way to, and I don't expect you to, some of you have been around long enough, you already know all this information. Some of you might be newer, and I don't expect you to go in and study the website particularly, but again, listen to your contacts. What are they interested in? Then go back and see if what we have may be related to their interest or their passion. And so we're asking them what they would like to hear about, invest in, ask them what they would like to get, what would get the most interest in their community as a whole, which may be 2 different things. They may be interested in special needs, but they may think their community would respond better to a presentation on the ecology of science at the Arava Institute. So understand that those are 2 different nuances and be aware of the distinctions there. It's important to note that the topic choice needs to be approved by a variety of formal and informal community leaders. So once you have a topic in mind, go make another phone call to the clergy, to the board president, to the 70-year-old who's been in the community since he was 20 and just in college, but really knows that community well, even though he or she is not a formal leader. You definitely want their buy-in. So be sure that you do get that buy-in before you make a formal settlement on a topic. Now, I provided, I think that there's an email went out to you. We have a project database, and it was modified last August, but it's still fairly relevant, and I think gives you some good information. And so we've got the task force in column A, the actual project in column B, the project budget, and the JNF share of the budget. This is really fascinating. And then, of course, any comments. And so, you know, Central Arava and Eilat, going to the Housing Development Fund, that does need to be updated because I know we have more housing sites than this now. Gaza Envelope, looking at the Resilience Center, the Play School Center, Halutza, the 3 areas of Halutza, go northwestern Galilee, Arad. You know, there's so much that we are doing that we nobody knows everything about, and you're not expected to. We just need to be aware of the big buckets so that when we hear something that a potential investor, potential partner would be interested in, we can direct them. And when we come up with a topic for our communities, we know the basics, and you can take this. And so maybe it is, people are really excited about having a central place where Zionists from around the world can come together and learn about Zionism, where there's going to be a place for high school students, for college students, for postgrads, for adult learning. And so you can say, yes, we've got this in the World Zionist Village. You're going to come to Ben and myself, who can speak on this, what are options for a presentation, and we will help you put it all together. Somebody has a question in chat? Oh, yes, Jeff asked that to send, yes, definitely we will send you the sheet, absolutely. So topics and speakers. This is probably the most difficult aspect of planning your event, because you want somebody who is knowledgeable, somebody who is charismatic, somebody who can engage with this audience. And you know, we've got an outlier here with Michael, who's on the line, who really loves our small communities, and he can really meet with small community people. That's not always the case with somebody who's in a large city going to a small community, and vice versa. You may have somebody who's very knowledgeable about, say, Macomb intentional communities, and they are from a small community themselves, but they may not be the best person to speak to a group in Atlanta, for example. So it's important to know about that. It's important to know who the affiliate representative is and whether or not they have maybe a special connection to your community, or maybe they don't, and they don't know anything about your community. So you're going to have to educate them in that particular community. Now, speaking of affiliates, as most of you know, our Israeli affiliates bring that aspect of intrigue and firsthand reporting on a project. It's always awesome when we can, well, most of the time it's awesome. I have seen a few, oops, maybe this was the wrong person for the wrong community, but 90% of the time, an Israeli affiliate is who we want to report on the project and bring that firsthand knowledge directly to our community. Things to keep in mind, though, is this going to be in person or Zoom? Since the lockdowns, we've had the opportunity to expand our speaker offerings because of virtual communication like we're doing today. And we would have done this anyway, but as we all know, there's been many opportunities to share JNF vision and on-the-ground projects with our Israeli affiliates because we can have them live and in person, and they're willing, oftentimes at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., to be up and to be talking with excitement and engaging and answering questions to people in the United States. And so Zoom is often an option. Sometimes though, for a particular community, Zoom is really not a good idea. They would rather have the Israeli affiliate, but that person's not available except by Zoom. And so I'm thinking of one of my smaller communities in Georgia right now. They actually said no to a in-person event with a Zoom-based affiliate because they wanted to wait till they could have an Israeli affiliate come and speak to them in person, even if it's on a different topic. So be aware of that. Also be aware that yeah, some of our affiliates actually don't like staying up past midnight, and they are not at their best in the early morning hours. And so we need to respect that. Sometimes they're willing to record something. A recording is third best at best. And sometimes it's not even that. So recording is also possible, but in person is often your best bet. If you do go with a Zoom option for an Israeli affiliate, make sure you have at least one other speaker who is live and in person in the room, because it adds that tangible personal feeling. And so even if you didn't think about having a JNF 101 and you were just going to go with Tiran Atiyah for Special in Uniform, who is not bad on Zoom, then I would suggest let's also do a short JNF 101 with somebody in the room so that people have that direct connection. You can look people in the eye and they know that they are being heard and responded to. Let's see, we've got another chat. Yes, Jeff notes that there is often a need to have different segments and different waypoints for an Israeli speaker. I am encountering that myself as well. Sometimes we have to piggyback with larger communities, this being small communities, unless I can set up a half a dozen speaking engagements for an Israeli affiliate. The only way that I can have somebody come is if Baltimore, Chicago, Denver, and Phoenix already have them booked, and then I can get them in their spare time or before or after their main trip. That is true. So thank you very much, Jeff, for bringing that up. We need to be cognizant of those realities as well. And that we need to often reserve them months in advance. And so that takes some planning and a little bit more work. Yeah, Eileen notes that we can do separate breakout rooms. Absolutely. So we could have a larger event with different speakers on different topics. I think that's a great idea, Eileen. So if we have a small cultivation, say with 60 people, you could have 3 or 4 breakout rooms where you've got an in-person speaker, you've got somebody on Zoom, and maybe there's a recording just to meet the topical needs of the people. That's absolutely a great, great idea. Sometimes an inspirational lay leader is the better choice, especially if you have come up with a good date that really, really works, but you haven't been able to come up with an Israeli affiliate who is able and willing to be where you need them to be, but you've got a lay leader who knows her stuff, who is engaging, who's charismatic and flexible and able to be where you need them to be. For example, Miriam May from the Arva Institute. She is a fantastic affiliate. Well, I mean, she's actually an employee of the Arva Institute, but she fits all the characteristics of a lay leader, and she really does present, from my perspective, a very encouraging, very engaging presentation, both live and on Zoom, of the Arva Institute, and I highly recommend her. I also, recommend task force members because they've been on site at the project if they have been a member of the task force for a year or more, they've been there and they can give you the latest up to date. They can go and call the affiliate, have a half-hour conversation, get some new photos, get some new data, and then present that in person. And then, of course, there are other lay leaders who simply have significant knowledge because that's their thing. So there are many of our partners, as you guys know, who are not necessarily on a task force, but they know everything there is to know about the Galilee Culinary Institute. They have seen all of the presentations on YouTube. They have heard all of the podcasts, and they know the staff and they know what they're good at. And it's just fantabulous to see lay leaders like that. And yeah, they may be even more flexible with their time as well. So that's on topics and speakers. Any questions? Any other comments? Thank you very much for helping me there, guys. You brought up some good points. Invitations. Of course, we want to invite people to attend our event. And first of all, we need to come up with that guest list. And how do we do that? We don't want it too broad, and we certainly don't want it to be too narrow. And so, of course, we want to invite those who have expressed an interest in the course of your networking calls, but we also want to make sure we include those whose names you've been given by those who are expressing an interest. Because again, that isomorphism concept, if you have an interest and you have a friend and you've mentioned that friend in the course of stating your interest, and you call that friend and say, Bob, Sheila said that you would be interested in coming to her house to learn more about training African students at ACAT in Israel. They're going to go, oh, Sheila said that? Yes, of course I'll be there. And so they're going to be responding, maybe not for the ideal reason, but it's still a related and an important reason. We also want to make sure we include all formal leadership in our invitations. This is, it may be obvious, but I wanted to make sure that I got it down because we don't want to step on any toes. So all clergy, all Federation, JCC, day school, preschool, anybody who we know that holds a formal leadership role, unless they've expressly stated they do not want to attend, which does sometimes happen, in which case you can send them a special email instead of on the e-blast, send it personally, say, I know you said you're not available or you're really interested, but I just wanted to make sure that you were invited. And they may say, oh, don't even send me that. And so be aware of that. But otherwise, all formal leadership, and you may even want to include informal leadership on that as well. So once we have our guest list made, and of course, you're going to be working with, in this case, Ben, to make sure that we have everybody in the database that may be in a good geographical area who may have given to this particular project or has shown an interest, or we think maybe we just want to send an e-blast to everybody. And that's a decision to be made as a committee of the whole. And we also want to be utilizing our new network, again, to make this guest list. Well, then generally what we do is we use 3 different methods. The first, of course, is email. It's real easy, right? We're going to work with your staff, with the COE, to come up with a solid invitation, a solid registration experience. Sometimes you have unique aspects of registration that need to be included. And so we need to stair step through that. We need to test the registration form, make sure that it reads well, that everything is clear, that there's no typos, things like that. We're going to be relying on you to help us with that, because this is going to reflect on you, the lay leader, as much as it is on staff. And we want to be able to make sure that the email says what it says and get as many people to respond to it. But as we know, email are not always open. Sometimes they go to spam and nobody has any clue. So it's important to use the telephone as well, to follow up all email invitations as much as possible anyway, with a telephone call, with a text, with a WhatsApp, whatever tools that we can use to follow up on that email invitation, to say, please check your email. Just sent you an invitation to our event on September the 1st. We'd really love to have you there. Get back to me with more questions or something like that. And sometimes a hard copy is necessary. Sometimes we have people who say absolutely no email, or they don't even have email. There are still people who don't have email or don't have personal, only for work. I ran into that situation last week, which was very interesting, where I thought this person had no email at all. And they said, of course, I have a work email, but I don't give it to anybody because why would I want to? And so I said, great, how do I get a hold of you? Send me hard copy. Like, great, I will do that. Many people don't like hard copy today, but sometimes that's a necessity. And so we need to make sure that we have provided for that if necessary. If you do have a hard copy option though, try to make it a hand delivery tool so that that person is still getting an in-person, and that way too, you don't have to do the telephone follow because you know they've gotten a face-to-face. Here's the invitation. Please register and attend our event. Oh, and on that note, everyone must register. Yes, regardless of how they are contacted, we have to have everybody register, even if they have their friend register for them on their computer, because all they have is their smartphone and tablet. And for whatever reason, the registration form isn't working well. Everybody needs to be registered. And this actually is part of our soft ask, because there's a donation form available on every registration. So it's one way that we're doing the soft ask before the hard ask at the event, and then at follow-up. And so we've had our event, which is planned out. We had the speakers showed up, people showed up. We had excellent cheese and wine, and everything went fabulous, and we felt really good. Lots of warm fuzzies coming out. But now we need to get back on the phone and make sure that everybody who was there receives a follow-up phone call. Perhaps they responded to the ask, and they are going to be receiving, of course, a thank you at that follow-up. And we're also, though, going to be thanking them for attending and saying, what did you like best? We need to know. Please help us understand what really makes things click for you and your community. And where can we improve? We know we're not perfect. And perhaps we missed something important that you read on our website that we missed, or perhaps there's something that you would have liked to ask and you didn't feel comfortable, there wasn't the opportunity, and then we can improve and show that we're willing to go the extra mile to do that. And then, of course, if they did not make a commitment at the event, then we're going to ask, please join me. Join Jewish National Fund with an investment in this project. This is our hard ask. This is our final opportunity surrounding this event to bring in a new unit, a new partner to the Jewish National Fund family. Questions?